Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. There was a lot of message from the speech given by Dr. Farouk, telling us that our Muslim community have to move away from the idea of a static universe, going towards a more dynamic kind of thinking. Okay. Next, I will introduce and invite Professor James Piscatori. Professor James is currently the Deputy Director and Professor at the Australian National University Centre for Arab and Islamic Studies. Prior to holding this position, he was Chair of the School of Government and International Affairs at Durham University, a Fellow of the Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies and a Fellow of Wadham College, Oxford, and Professor of International Politics at the University of Aberystwyth. He has held professorial He has held professorial appointments in the Department of International Politics, the University of Wales, and the School of Advanced International Studies of the Johns Hopkins University. In addition, he has been a research fellow at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, London, and senior fellow at the Council of Foreign Relations, New York. He has also been senior fellow at two research institutions, the Royal Institute of International Affairs in London and New York, served on several international collaborative committees such as the Committee for the Comparative Study of Muslim Society of the Social Science Research Council, and was also the co-editor of a series of Muslim politics for Princeton University Press. Professor James is the author of Islam in a World of Nation-State and co-author of Muslim Politics. He is the editor of Islam in the Political Process and co-editor of Muslim Travelers, Pilgrimage, Migration, and the Religious Imagination. Islam, Islamists, and the Electoral Principle appeared in a series of papers for the International Institute for the Study of the Modern Muslim World in Leiden. He has also co-edited Monarchies and Nation, Globalization and Identity in the Arab States of the Gulf. I would like to invite him as the next speaker to continue.
Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here and to be able to celebrate the 10th anniversary of this wonderful organization. I'm so pleased that the theme of the afternoon and in the conference which has preceded it in many ways has been about reform in the Muslim world, and obviously this is a point of great emphasis for the Islamic Renaissance Front, as well as for all of us who are trying to contend with the changing world. I just want to remind us that it is a venerable tradition that this society, this organization fits into. The combination of Tajdeed and Islah has very venerable, as you know, and entrenched roots. And it begins, of course, from the Prophet himself, who reformed the environment of Mecca. And then over time, there have been great reformers, as you know, Mujaddids, who have brought their thinking to changing the circumstances in which Muslims and Islam has found itself. And I just want to maybe emphasize maybe three of them, or remind us of three of them, because I think they apply to the work that this foundation has done. The first, of course, is Ibn Rushd, who placed a great emphasis upon rationality and on the way of explaining things through nature rather than automatically through divine ordinance. I think this fits. I think that Dr. Farouk himself, I may say, is Rushdian. And may I also add to this list Al-Shatibi, who the president had referred to the maqasid, and I think the emphasis upon the objectives whereby we think about what are the basic ideas needs always to be before us. This is what the Germans call the Grundnorms, the idea that there are foundational ideas that we need to strip away all the accretions and get back to them from time to time. And then just one more, so Sayyid Ahmad Khan in the 19th century, a phrase which I think you like, who said quite famously, the work of God is identical to the word of God. So it's good to be reminded that there is that venerable tradition. So may I take this opportunity to say that the Islamic Renaissance Front has very much dealt with these issues of reform and has done so and spoken with respect, with equality, and advancing dialogue. And I think these are the missing qualities that we have in cultural and social studies today. And in fact, I hope you will agree that these concepts are much more, these values are much more responsive and have a greater resonance than the supposed clash of civilization and the hard, harsh ideologies of radical Islamism. I think Dr. Farouk and the Islamic Renaissance Front have firmly implanted the idea that conversation and dialogue are the necessary prelude to cooperation, but also to meaningful understanding, and not just to passive tolerance. You know, Churchill is reported to have said of a trying dinner companion, the poor man doesn't know how to have a conversation, but unfortunately, he knows how to speak. Clearly, it seems in your case that you know the value of conversation, you know the value of dialogue. And I think, you know, those of us, others of us who are in the academic world, I think we're a little jealous of the kind of work that you've done, the kind of influence that you have had far beyond the classroom. So most of us are consumed with teaching and marking and tutorials, and we dream of greater worlds, and you've launched a reform movement. And I think we need to keep that into perspective. One can only admire this kind of applied scholarship in the postmodernist age. So if I may say, I'd like to emphasize there are many contributions of the IRF, but could I just emphasize two great contributions that I think you've made. The first is to challenge directly the idea that somehow rethinking the issues and the concepts of the day is un-Islamic. And I think you've amply shown and you've developed that there are so many interconnected layers, such a great cross-fertilization of ideas that it's impossible to separate them completely. You've drawn on a very rich intellectual history, a blending of Hellenic, Persian, Arab, Malay ideas, and we're so much richer for it, and the Islamic world is so much richer for this blend, which you've put great emphasis on. And to remind us of the kind of endorsement from the scriptures on this. Knowledge is the road to paradise, if we follow one of the hadiths of Sahih Muslim. Even a hadith holds that he who seeks knowledge is doing so fi sabil Allah. And the medieval writers were quite clear that anyone who used knowledge for personal gain was really doomed to hell. So your work, the work of the IRF, is a reminder that we all belong to what I would call an intellectual commonwealth, a spirit of interconnectedness, by drawing on and expressing the right of others to express their points of views, to defend them, to see that there are many paths to scholarship and erudition, and indeed many paths to religious rights. And by isolating those who refer to scriptural reference only to justify violence and state power, I think you've questioned that. So, and I think it's quite consistent, this idea of this approach to knowledge, with your motto behind me, liqawmin yatafarriqun. So for the people who think. And I think it's so refreshing to have someone not shy away from the multiple layers of scholarship. Can I also say that the second contribution that I believe the IRF has made, and that you personally have made, is that you underpin all of what you've said and all of what you've done by placing freedom at the core of your worldview. So at its best, I think reform can remind us of the core moral and political imaginary, the reimagining of a political and a social order that allows, just as you've just said, that allows for individuals to realize their own destiny, to realize their own basic rights, and to realize many of their aspirations. So you've done this by creating a functioning civil society organization that bridges faith and bridges civic engagement in a pluralist environment. And I think in the process, you've subverted the common notion that Islam and democracy are somehow strangers to each other, that they're alienated from each other and mutually antagonistic. So I think as we all try to live up to these ideals, and sometimes that we fail in the process, it's time to bring to a close once and for all this futile debate over whether Muslim democrats can exist. Your heartening and positive example, I said, shows that there is no contradiction in the terms. Can I also just put emphasis on this role of the civil society organization? I think it's a wonderful and a very contentious concept, and it has different ways of manifesting itself. To my mind, and I want to invoke the words here of the political philosopher Michael Walzer at Harvard, who said that civil society is that realm of uncoerced freedom and free association of individuals. I like that, uncoerced. And I think that's exactly what has occurred in the organization and what it promotes, etc. And so in so doing, it has tried very much to advance the cause of change in society, but it's a slow process. It's a messy process. It's one which requires constant vigilance, particularly because the powers that be will seek to interrupt it. They'll seek to co-opt it. But the fact that you haven't been co-opted, but rather continue to speak truth to power, is not only admirable, but welcome. It's a salutary development for Malaysia and for the rest of the Muslim world. There's an academic debate about whether civil society needs to be civil in terms of the discourse. Does one not need to avoid derogatory demagoguery? And there's a wonderful phrase of one of the scholars: in civility lies the difference between a well-ordered and uncivilized democracy. And what I think we can see here is that this organization has shown that as change can occur, however measured it is, however incremental it is, you can do so without becoming shrill and polemical. So if I may, at the end, say, and I invoke the words of Shakespeare, who said that words without thoughts never to heaven go. So as we've heard time and time again from this organization, and just heard from Dr. Farouk and his colleagues as well, their thoughts are both sincere and insightful. And as an interested observer in Islam and in the Muslim world, I congratulate you and wish you every success in translating your ideas in practice in the next 10 years and indeed in many decades to come. Congratulations.